Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you all of the settings on your Godox TT350, walk you through all of the different buttons and menu settings, and also all the different icons on the screen, so you can learn how to use this flash to take better pictures. Now this flash has most of the features of even their most advanced flashes, but it comes in a small, compact form factor. And of course it doesn't have as much power as their bigger flashes, but in terms of feature set, it has just about everything, so that's what we're going to cover today. All right, first let's just start with an overview of the exterior. And of course we have the model number here, TT350, and right next to it we have a small letter telling you which flash this was made for, because you need to buy these flashes to be brand specific to the camera that you have. Now in my case I have the letter O here for Olympus. This will also work with Panasonic, and then you might see a letter S for Sony, C for Canon, N for Nikon, F for Fuji, etc. So when you get this flash, make sure you get the right one that'll work with your camera. Now moving down, we have the power button, and then we have the 4 control buttons here, and then underneath some of the control buttons we have additional functions that operate when we press and hold or click on it, and we'll go through that. And then here is the test button to test fire the flash to make sure that it's working properly. And then we have a scroll wheel here and a set button in the middle. Okay, and then moving over to the side, we have the battery compartment. I have the AA battery version. And then on the front, we have the optical trigger window here. So this flash can be fired off camera using another flash. And we'll talk about that later. And then there's really nothing on this side. And then we're back to the front. And then finally on the top here, we can pull out a little diffuser to help diffuse the light more. And then we have a little bounce card here as well that slides out, and then you just slide these back in when you're not using them. And this flash articulates basically in every direction. Of course we have forward, we also have straight up, and then we can bounce to the left or right and either side like so. And then we can also do a full reverse bounce flash behind us. You should also receive a diffuser that you can put on top of the flash like so to help spread the light around, and then also possibly a stand of some type where you can mount the flash onto the stand so it'll stand up on its own. And on the bottom there'll be a 1/4 screw where you can mount this onto a light stand, for example. And then 2 very minor things, just ignore the Velcro strips that I have on here. I used to do some DIY light modifiers, but I really haven't used them in a long time. And then also, I forgot to mention, there's a little USB port inside here to update the firmware on the flash, but in 5 years I've never done that. Alright, so before we get into all the buttons and settings and everything, let me give you an overview of the features of this flash so we can kind of walk through them when we get to the buttons and dials. But there's 3 basic modes for this flash. There's TTL, which is basically fully automatic. There's full manual mode, where you control the power output of the flash. And then finally, there's something they call multi-flash, where that's kind of a specialized feature that I'll talk about briefly, but that really deserves its own video. Now this flash also has a built-in transmitter and receiver, so it can control other Godox flashes wirelessly, or be controlled by other flashes wirelessly or other triggers in the Godox X system, which is basically all of their on-camera flashes. Now sometimes the transmitter and receiver function is referred to as master and slave, meaning if this is acting as a transmitter and controlling other flashes, this would be the master flash. And if this is acting as a receiver, receiving commands from another flash or transmitter, then this will be the slave flash. And in fact, when we go into the menu and settings and things, you'll see the letters M and S referring to whether this flash is acting as a master flash or as a slave flash. So just be aware that the master and slave or transmitter receiver are pretty much interchangeable terms. Alright, let's first start by turning the flash on. So you just press and hold the power button for about 1 second and it should come on. And this is the default screen when you first get the flash, or this should be. However, if you've been messing around with your flash, you may have several numbers or icons and things all around the screen. But don't worry about that. By the end of this tutorial, you understand how to control all of the different settings and go back to this default setting if you want to. All right, let's start with the mode button here. And this is probably the most important button on the flash. And right now we're in TTL mode, which is basically fully automatic, meaning the camera and the flash are going to work together to control the exposure. And if we push the mode button, that'll put us into manual mode as indicated by the letter M. Not master in this case, but M in this case stands for manual mode. And below that we have the number 1/1, which tells us that we're at full power. 1/1 is full power. But we can lower the power by turning the wheel, and it works in thirds of a stop. So if we go down 3 clicks, we're down to half power. 3 more clicks, we're down to 1/4 power. And 3 more clicks, can you guess? 1/8 power. And so on until we get down to the minimum power output, which is 1/128th power. So this is only 1/128th as bright as full power, like here. And of course, this is only half as bright as full power. And then the next mode we have, if we click it again, we have multi-flash mode. And multi-flash mode is basically a manual mode as well, but you're controlling the flash, or telling it how many times to fire and how fast to fire and at what power output. So right now we're telling the flash that we want to be at 1/128th power. We want to fire 2 times when we push the shutter button, and we want to fire at the rate of 99 times per second, and they refer to it in hertz if you look at the fine print there. So right now, 1/128th power, fire twice, and do it at this speed 99 times per second. But it's not going to fire 99 times, it's only going to fire twice because we put the number 2 here. And this can be changed by just clicking the set button, and now we can tell the flash, for example, and this all go, let's see what's the lowest number. I rarely use this. We can tell it to fire only 1 time per second. And then if we click the set button again, that'll take us to how many times to fire each time we push the shutter button. So in this case, we're telling the flash to fire at 1/128th power, fire 2 times, 1 time per second. Now I know that's a little confusing and I never really use it, but there are some creative uses for this type of function, and that's what makes this flash so great. Like I said, it really does a lot of things for you. So let's go ahead and toggle back to TTL mode by pushing the mode button again. So as you can see, as I'm pushing the mode button, it just toggles between these 3 different modes. So right now, if we look in the top right here, we see AU and then the letters MM and zoom. So AU just means that right now the zoom function is set to automatic. So the flash is going to automatically set the beam angle to give you the best coverage for the field of view that you have or lens that you're using. And if you're using a zoom lens, it'll automatically adjust as well. And you'll hear the motor turning when you're adjusting your zoom. Then we have the millimeter or the focal length that it's trying to match. And then we also have this little icon here that just says zoom, that tells you that this AU is for the zoom function. And like I said, we can control it manually by pushing the zoom button. And now you see AU is blinking. And if we rotate the wheel, we can adjust this flash from 24 millimeters up to 105 millimeters. So if you have a wide angle lens, you would use 24 millimeters, or you can go up to 105 millimeters. And like I said, you can set this manually for creative reasons, or possibly the flash didn't recognize the lens that you're using. If you're using an adapted lens, you can set it manually here. Now this millimeter range is in terms of full frame 35 millimeter cameras. So if you're using, say, a Sony full frame camera and you have a 24 millimeter lens, this is the focal length that you want to use. And like I said, this can go all the way up to, I have to push the zoom button again, all the way up to 105 millimeters. And then you'll also notice that the letter AU is gone, and now you see the letter M here, meaning you are manually controlling the field of view or the focal length of the lens. And you can actually see the flash head moving back and forth inside the housing here as you manually zoom. So let me show you how that works. See that? So basically it has its own lens in here to spread the light out wider or to make it narrower. So I just recommend you leave it in automatic mode for now. And then once you get a feel for the light output from this flash, you can mess around with the zoom settings to see if you can make any changes that will help you out either creatively or practically. All right, so I'm just going to just dial in 28 and just click the set button, and you'll see it stops blinking. But if I want to go back to automatic, I click the zoom button and just rotate this back until I see the letter AU for automatic, and then just click the set button. All right, now you may have noticed below the zoom button is C.Fn, which means custom functions. Now this may vary from unit to unit, but my particular unit has 2 custom functions available to it. If you have more than I do, you'll have to check the manual to see what they do. But for mine, if I push and hold the zoom button, I can get into the custom functions. As you can see, the C.Fn icon down here and ST on. That means standby is on. So basically, if I don't use the flash, it'll go into standby mode or go to sleep. This conserves battery life, and it won't come back on until I tap the shutter button or one of the buttons on the flash. Let me go back in. Now if I want to change this, I just click the set button and rotate the wheel, and I can set this to off. So now the flash will not go to sleep. It'll just stay on at all times. And that's useful really in studio situations where you're setting things up and you don't want to keep going back to the flash and waking it up. Okay, let me go back in. And I'm going to leave this to on, like so, and click set. Now if I rotate the wheel again, I can go to BL-10. This is the backlighting, or this orange lighting you're seeing. And right now it's set to turn off after 10 seconds. If I push the set button, I can change the backlighting to be off. As you see, it just went off. Or to stay on at all times. And of course, 10 seconds is for conserving battery life. Off is just off, and then on, right? So I'm going to leave it on for the video here, so it's just easier to see the display. And then to exit out, you can just wait, and it'll just go back to the screen automatically after a few seconds, or you can just click on the mode button, and it'll bring you right back to this screen as well. Now the next button here is the sync button. This flash is actually capable of what's known as high-speed sync. And what that means is that cameras have a sync speed or shutter speed that you can use when you're using flash, and that's called the flash sync speed. And that usually has a minimum of, say, 1/250th of a second. On some cameras it's lower, like 1/200th or 1/180th. Whatever that number is, that's going to be the fastest shutter speed you can use with a flash. However, if your camera is high-speed sync compatible and your flash is high-speed sync compatible, like the TT350, then you can use faster shutter speeds like 1/500th of a second or 1/1000th of a second. Up to, I believe with this flash, you can do 1/4000th of a second. I mean, the specs are different from flash to flash, but generally speaking, you can use up to at least 1/4000th of a second, sometimes 1/8000th of a second, and that's the high-speed sync. And, you know, there's reasons on how that works. I won't get into that. But just know that with this flash, I don't recommend using the high-speed sync function, generally speaking, because it's just not powerful enough, because when you use high-speed sync, it reduces the power of the flash, and this is already a pretty small flash. But there are situations, I think if you need a faster shutter speed of maybe a little bit, like 1/500th of a second, for like macro subjects and things like that, that's when this could be more useful. So the way you enable it is very simple. You just click on the sync button and you'll see the little icon here for high-speed sync. So now your camera can use just about any shutter speed it's capable of. But like I said, I normally would say make sure you leave that off. Now the sync button has another function which turns on and off the wireless capabilities of this flash. So you access that by pushing and holding the sync button. And you can see the little antenna here blinking, asking us what wireless mode do you want to be in. So we can rotate the dial here, and you see the little M here in bold. That means the flash is now in master mode or transmitter mode, and it's telling us that we're on channel 2. And we can, oh, it stopped blinking. It has to be blinking, so let me push and hold the sync button. And now I can rotate the wheel. And now we're in slave mode or receiver mode, indicated by the letter S, but we're still on channel 2. And if I have no icons here, I can click set, and that turns the wireless function off. So generally I recommend, until you start getting more flashes, right, make sure that the wireless function is turned off to save battery life, right? Now when you want to use the wireless features of this flash, there's basically 3 things you need to set. The first one being whether this flash is going to act as the transmitter or receiver, i.e. master or slave. The second thing is what channel will this transmitter or receiver carry the signals on. And then the third thing is what group are you going to control, or what group do you want this to be controlled in. So first let's just put the flash into wireless mode as a transmitter. Meaning we want this flash to control other flashes off camera. So I'll press and hold the sync button and rotate the dial until I see the letter M here in bold, meaning this is now in master mode or transmitter mode. Next to it, you'll see that we're on channel 2, and we can change that. And then we'll talk about the groups next. But let's first change this, say, to channel 1. And you can do that by pressing and holding the slave button to activate the group and channel as indicated underneath. So let me press and hold this, and then you'll see the number 2 next to channel blinking. So I can change this to any other channel, and looks like, let's see what the maximum is. We can have 16 channels, but let's set it to channel 1, and then we'll click the set button. So now this flash is acting as the transmitter or master flash on channel 1. All right, now let's look at the other things on the screen here. We have a letter M here, which refers to the master flash, and it's set to 1/2 power in manual mode, indicated by the bold letter M up here. So right now, this flash will fire when you push the shutter button at 1/2 power in manual mode. But we can change it, right? By pushing the mode button, we can change it to not fire at all. In effect, making this act as a trigger only and not fire or add any light to the scene. So again, the flash is acting as a transmitter indicated by M on channel 1. The M here indicates that we're setting what this flash will do. And then this icon here is telling us that the flash has been turned off. So now it's only acting as a trigger. Click the mode button again. We can be in TTL mode. And we click the mode button again. We can be in manual mode for this flash. And we click it again. And there's no multi-flash function when you're using this as a transmitter or receiver, for that matter, when you're in wireless mode. Now when we go back to manual mode, we change the manual power setting exactly the same way by just turning the dial. So now we're back to full power, 1/2 power, 1/4 power. There's one more thing that I forgot to show you actually, is when you're in TTL mode, you can actually dial in exposure compensation, because remember, this is a full automatic mode, TTL, and you can dial in exposure compensation of the flash only, independent of the camera's meter. And you do that by just clicking the set button. And you'll see right now no exposure compensation has been dialed in, but if we want the flash to be a little bit brighter than what the camera and flash calculated, we can say, okay, be 1 stop brighter, or 2 stops, or 3 stops, and then you can go back in the other direction down to -3 stops. So you just have a little more creative control. I can do this in the camera as well. I don't have to do it through the flash directly. And that's going to depend on the camera you have, but most cameras have flash exposure compensation built into their own menu system, and this flash should follow those instructions. So now that we've set what this flash is going to do, in this case we're going to have it run in TTL mode, we can now set what we want the other flashes to do off camera. And the off-camera flashes can be assigned into groups, and this flash in particular can control up to 3 groups. Each group can be 1 flash, 2 flashes, as many flashes as you want, but let's just say you have one flash on group A and one flash on group B and no flash for group C. You just have 2 extra flashes. All you have to do is just click the slave button once, and now you're in group A mode. And group A mode is set to off, meaning group A will not fire. So we're going to change the mode for group A to TTL. Now we click the slave button again, and now we can control group B. Group B is set to TTL with minus 0.3 exposure compensation. So let's change that. So I'm going to click the set button and just dial that back to 0 and click set. And then let's look at channel C or group C. And group C is set to TTL. We want group C to be just off. So we're going to change the mode to off. And we can double check our settings just by toggling through each group. So we click the slave button. We're back to this flash, the master flash. It's in TTL. Group A is in TTL. Group B is in TTL. And group C is turned off. And let's say I made a mistake in group A. I can just toggle to group A and say, actually, I don't want this to be TTL. I just want this to be manual, because maybe it's just a fill-in flash, and I'll just set this to 1/16 power. And we're done. We can check group B, still on TTL, and we're good to go. So now that we have the master flash set up, we need to set up the slave flashes. So let's say you have 2 more TT350s. So I'll just take this out, bring it back in. And it doesn't matter what's on here, right? We can always change whatever it says. And we need to set this up to be a slave flash. So remember, we push and hold the sync button to get into the wireless mode. And we just rotate the wheel until we see the letter S. So now this flash is in slave mode on channel 1. And we'll just click set. If we weren't on channel 1, all we have to do is push and hold the slave button and just change the channel to the channel we need. And again, in this case, we'll just be on channel 1. Click OK, or set. And then we want this flash to be on group A. And by default, it starts on group A. And that's fine. But if we want to change the group, we just do a short press on the slave button to toggle through what group we want this flash to be in. So we'll just leave this on A. Now, let's get the other flash. And we need to set the next flash, slave mode, channel 1, group B. And that's already done here except for the group. And all we have to do is click the slave real quick. And now this flash is in group B, slave mode, channel 1. So that's everything to set up this flash in wireless mode to be as a transmitter or as a receiver, i.e. master flash or slave flash. Now there is one more slave flash function that I haven't covered yet, and that's the optical trigger slave function. So what that means is, right here, remember in the front, we have an optical trigger. So if this flash sees another flash fire, this flash will fire at the same time. And you don't need to use the wireless radio trigger. So let's go ahead and turn off the wireless trigger. Click set. Now, whenever you use the optical trigger, you can only use this flash in manual mode. So we have to put the flash in the manual mode, and then we can push the slave button, and you'll see a little icon here, S1. If I push it again, you'll see S2. And if I push it again, the icons disappear, meaning the optical trigger has been turned off. So let's put this in S1. So what's the difference between S1 and S2? Well, S1 will tell this flash to fire the instant it sees another flash fire. S2 tells this flash to fire the instant it sees a second flash fire. So what's the purpose of that? Well, what actually happens if you have your other flashes in TTL mode, your camera actually fires a pre-flash to calculate the exposure, then fires a second flash with the correct brightness to get the proper exposure, and then opens the shutter and takes the picture. And that's what S2 is for. So that it will not fire when it sees the pre-flash, it'll only fire when it sees the actual flash used to take the exposure. So if you're taking pictures and you're not seeing any light output from this flash, even though you see it firing, it's probably because you have your on-camera flash or other flashes in TTL mode, and this flash is in S1 mode. So you need to put it into S2 mode, and then you should see the exposure or light coming from this flash in your picture. So that's everything I know about the TT350, and if you found this video helpful, consider buying me a coffee or making a small donation in the links below. They are greatly appreciated. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If I missed anything, let me know. But I plan on making more videos on the Godox flash system, including the triggers. So be sure to subscribe and hit the bell button. But I appreciate you watching, and I hope to see you again soon.